Aloha and welcome to our video on behavioral biology. In this video, we will define and give examples of internal and external stimuli, and we will also define and give examples for innate and learned behaviors. So let's begin our discussion with stimuli. Stimuli is going to be a trigger for a response. So it's going to be something that will elicit a response in an organism. We have two kinds of stimulus. We have an internal and we have an external. And let's start with the internal. Notice internal starts with I. These are going to come from factors inside the organism. Things like germs, dehydration, pain, a lack of energy. Something inside of the organism that's going to cause some kind of a reaction. Now the opposite of those are going to be external, and that starts with an E, and these are going to come from factors that come from the environment. So it would be like temperature outside, or whether or not there's predators, or whether or not there's food or water, something in the environment that's going to cause that reaction or cause a behavior to happen. So when we talk about stimuli, these are the causes for the behavior, and remember that they can either be internal or they can be external. Now, when we start talking about behaviors, these are going to be a response to the stimuli. We have two different kinds of behaviors we want to focus on. We have what we call innate and we have what we call learned. The innate behaviors are inherited. They don't need to be learned. These are ones that they naturally know how to do. Some examples would be like a spinning of a web for a spider, or swallowing your food, or crying when something hurts. And most innate behaviors are going to be related to these two things. They're going to be related to getting food and to keeping safe. So you're born with some behaviors that will get you food, or get that food inside of you, or get that food working, or something of that nature, and then to keep you safe as well. Now the opposite of innate are going to be these learned behaviors, and these are going to be acquired or learned from observing somebody else. And some examples of these would be like how to throw a ball, or to wash food, or to talk, or to follow commands. Things that you're taught how to do. So those are going to be our learned behaviors. And learned behaviors generally fall into the realm of culture. And we talked about culture being a uniquely human trait, but we see that this can be in some other species as well. And in the lessons, you'll see about some snow monkeys in Japan that have learned from watching others. So there's a little bit of culture in that group of animals as well. So that's it for this video. As always, the lessons will go into a little bit more detail for you, and good luck with them, and we'll see you in the next video. Aloha and welcome to our video discussing the types of behavior. In this video, we will describe parental care, courtship, defensive, and territorial behaviors, and we'll give some examples of spatial learning, imprinting, and observational learning. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about types of innate behavior. And if you remember the innate behaviors, those were two that were focused on either food or safety. Okay, so those are the important things that we need to make sure that we're there if we're to stay alive. When we have our innate behaviors, we can kind of break them down into 5 different groups. The first one is going to be parental care. And by parental care, what we're talking about is ensuring that the offspring survive, being a good parent. And some examples of these would be in our newly hatched birds, they want to eat right away, or the building of a nest, or things of that nature, something that's going to ensure that offspring are going to survive. The next innate behavior is going to be courtship. And while courtship isn't food or safety per se, it is the propagation of the species. So it does fit in here. And the main purpose for courtship is quite simply to attract a mate. So examples of these would be like a male peacock. When he opens up his tail feathers and fans them out, what he's doing is he's trying to attract a mate. Then we get into our more safety ones. The first are going to be the defensive behaviors. And these are going to be things to avoid or protect you against predators. And things that we'll see here are going to be some warning coloration. We see it in wasps, we'll see it in fish, where you'll have an animal that'll flash a bright color, and that'll kind of let you know that, hey, this isn't something I want to mess with. We also have aggressive behaviors, and aggressive behaviors are going to be more, as the word implies, aggressive. So these will warn the predators not to approach. Okay, and that can be something like a rattlesnake that'll shake its rattle on its tail that'll kind of let you know that it's there. So it's somewhat defensive, but it's also more aggressive. It's letting you know that if you get close, hey, I'm going to come after you. And then finally, the last one is going to be our territorial behaviors. And this is going to defend the area determined by the animal. So this is going to be more in the realms of safety and food, because now I'm doing what? Keeping out any aggressive species, keeping out any competition so I have more food. And for examples of these, we might see like a male robin, which will claim its territory with a song. So these are just some examples, but these are our 5 behaviors or types of innate behaviors. These are the ones that we're born with. And remember, those deal mostly with food, safety, and propagation of the species. Now, sometimes we can have a combination of innate and learned behaviors, and it forms a more complex behavior that'll come there. And we'll talk about a couple of those now, but you'll get a little bit more in the lessons. The first is this idea of spatial learning, and that's done by recognizing features. And the example they'll use is a wasp that comes back, and the wasp basically will learn that its home is going to be recognized by finding landmarks. And in this case, it'll be a circle of pine cones, and it knows where to find its home from there if it's not around it. Now, if you change it up a little bit and made a circle of stones and a same thing of pine cones but in a triangle, we can determine whether it's the shape of the circle or whether it's the material being the pine cone. And we found out that it tends to be the shape that gives it this one. So in spatial learning, we kind of learn where things are by landmarks, and animals can do the same thing. Another type of behavior is what we call imprinting. And imprinting is where a baby animal will bond with the first object it sees. And we see a lot of that in ducklings and things of that nature, where when they hatch, they'll imprint on the mom, and that's why they know to follow the mom around. So they just have this innate feeling when they hatch, or this innate behavior, that the first thing they see, that's what they're going to imprint on. So if you're to raise ducks and things like that nature, when they hatch, if you're the first thing they see, then they'd actually imprint on you instead and follow you all around. And then finally, we have what we call observational learning, and that's where you learn by watching or listening to another animal. And they'll talk a little bit about bird song, and that'll be one. And we also talked about the snow monkeys, seeing the other snow monkeys like wash off stuff. They learn that behavior that way. And we get a lot of our learning through observational learning as well. Okay, well, that's it for this video. As always, good luck on the lessons, and we will see you in the next video. Aloha and welcome to our forms of communication video. And the goals for this video are to identify and give examples of social behaviors. We'll give some examples of animal communications. We'll show how communications can work together. And finally, we'll give an example of an advanced communication system. So when we're talking about animal communication, we're talking about several social behaviors that fit into this realm. And 3 examples here that we want to talk about real quickly. The first is aggressive behavior. And we see that with our polar bears here. And they could be fighting for territory or competing for resources. But it's an aggressive, all out, you're showing who's the boss, kind of a dominance type of thing going on there. We talked earlier about courtship behaviors, and we can see a nice example down here with our male peacock here displaying his tail. And what that does is that's trying to get a mate. Some birds will do it with song, some do it with coloration. We can see all different kinds of courtship behaviors. And then the third type is this cooperative behavior, where the individual works towards the benefit of the goal, not for the individual itself. And one of the really good examples of that would be the flocking of birds or the schooling of fish, where it helps get through the medium. So when they fly, it breaks up the air a little bit easier, so it's easier for the rest of the birds. Or when they're swimming, it breaks through the water a little bit and creates an easier way for them to go, but also it's a good deterrence against predation. So we can see how this communication in animals, this ability for them to talk to one another and work together or work against one another, all of these behaviors kind of work out that way. And that's what we're talking about when we say animal communication. Now, when animals communicate, they send out signals, and these signals can be for different things. And we have a couple examples here that we'll go through. We saw the courtship one. That's pretty basic. We can understand that. We also have food calls, and it's kind of funny we call it a food call, but an example we'll use is our bee or our wasp's dance, which kind of shows where the food is. So when the bee returns to the hive, it'll find the central location, and it'll start doing this little dance. And as it does this little dance, it'll kind of go around in a circle first and let everybody know, hey, look, I'm getting ready to dance. And then it'll go around in a circle and kind of wiggle its way here, and then come around and wiggle its way here, and come around and wiggle its way here. And what it's doing is it's sending a clear message to the rest of the animals in the beehive that that's where the food is, so that he can communicate effectively where we can go out and find more food. Now, we also have alarm calls, and we can see our alarm call down here, which lets you know that something's there. Some danger is occurring. There's a predator in the area. We need to take cover, and that's a way that you can protect the entire population that way. And another one that they talk about briefly in the lessons is metacommunication. Metacommunication kind of lets you know that, hey, what's going to happen isn't exactly what you think it is. And the good example here we can see with our puppies playing is the puppies will sit there and they'll wag their tails with each other and they'll kind of show a playful face, and then they start playing a little more aggressively. In the wild, they would be practicing their aggressive behaviors if they had to fight for territories, and that kind of lingers over. That's an innate behavior that lingers over. But what they do is they first say, hey, I'm wagging my tail, we're just going to play, we're not doing this for real. And it's this meta communication allows, it's a little bit more complex, but it allows them to work on the innate behaviors if they needed to in nature, but without the pure aggressive nature behind it. Okay, sometimes we have multiple signals working together. In the lessons, I'll go over a couple examples. I want to talk to you about them here. The first is we have this red spot here on our seagull. And what our seagull does is that red spot, when he comes back to the nest and the babies see that, they'll open up their mouth because they know now it's time to feed. And we can see how these different signals together work towards the benefit of propagating this species, keeping them going on, because now we have a signal for the baby to know it's time to eat. Now there's another type of signals that are out there. These are chemical signals called pheromones. And pheromones in animals are generally linked to courtship. The females will send out a scent and that attracts the males. The males will come in and then they'll compete for the female's attention. But plants can do it the same way, where they will attract their insects to them, and the insects are coming for the sake of pollination for the plant. So they'll come in here, they'll get pollen from one flower and take it to another one, and that's how the plants are able to reproduce. Now, some communication in animals can be quite advanced. One of the examples they like to talk about is the vervet monkey. And the vervet monkey actually has the ability to send out a signal when a predator comes in. So it warns the entire colony that there's something bad coming. But what makes it unique is they have multiple signals, and the signals mean something else. So if one of them sees a jaguar, it'll send out the vervet jaguar signal. And what that does is that will send the vervets up into the trees for safety. Now, if they're out there and they see, let's say, a predatory bird like an eagle out here, they will also give a signal, but this signal is going to be a little different. And instead of them climbing the trees and becoming food, they'll hide under the trees, and that'll allow them to move that way. And then finally, if it's a snake or some other predator, then what it'll do is it'll cause a different behavior, but what would work best to avoid the snake. So what we're seeing is these vervets have the ability to see these different predators, and they have a separate behavior for each one, and they have a separate call for each one. So it's kind of an advanced system of communication that we're seeing there. Okay, that's it for this video. As always, good luck with the questions in your assignments, and I will see you in the next video.